You are not blocked. You are cluttered. There is a difference, and that difference is the entire point of this video. Most third eye content tells you Ajna is blocked by stagnant energy, unresolved trauma, or spiritual misalignment. And some of that is true, but what nobody is saying is that the most common cause of a clouded third eye in 2026 is not an energetic problem, it is a cognitive one. It is the accumulated noise of a mind that has never been taught how to discriminate between what is actually in front of it and what it has manufactured from fear, habit, and an overcrowded information environment. You are not drowning in spiritual fog, you are drowning in undisciplined thinking. The solution is not more meditation, more visualization, or more activation ceremonies. It is surgical precision, the willingness to pick up the tool that the Stoics refined over 500 years and apply it directly to the seat of your inner vision. Marcus Aurelius returned to one question every single morning of his life. Not what I see, but how I see it. Not what arrived, but what faculty am I using to process what arrived. That question is the practice that clears the third eye, and it begins with understanding what the third eye actually is. Drop this in the comments before you keep watching. I do not need more vision. I need cleaner thinking. Say it before you hear the rest. Before we go further, a word on what this channel does. The Stoics never worked with chakras. The yogic tradition and Greek philosophy developed in completely different worlds, in different languages, addressing different cultural contexts. I am not claiming they are the same system. This channel places these traditions side by side and finds where they point to the same truth. In this video, they both point to the mind's commanding faculty and what happens when it is trained versus when it is left to run without discipline. Here's what spiritual oversaturation looks like in 2026. You have consumed more content about the third eye than any generation in history. You know the color, you know the location, you know the crystals, the frequencies, the meditation techniques, the dietary adjustments. You have watched dozens of videos about opening it, and you still feel mentally foggy. Still feel like you cannot trust your own perception. You still feel like the clarity everyone talks about is just out of reach. That is not a spiritual failure. It happens when you add more input to a system that hasn't been taught how to process what it already has. Ajna, the sixth energy center, means beyond wisdom in Sanskrit. It is also translated as the command center, not the receiver of supernatural visions. The command center, the seat of discernment, pattern recognition, and the ability to perceive what is real beneath the surface of what appears. When it is functioning clearly, you do not see more. You see accurately. You recognize patterns that others miss. You distinguish between what your mind is actually perceiving and what it has constructed from assumption and anxiety. That is not mysticism. That is high-level cognitive function. And it is exactly what the Stoics were training when they wrote about the discipline of the mind. The modern burnout most people attribute to spiritual disconnection is, in large part, the exhaustion of a mind processing thousands of impressions per day, with no reliable method for sorting them. Every notification, piece of content, conversation, and piece of news arrives as an impression that demands evaluation. If the evaluating faculty is untrained, undisciplined, or overwhelmed, the result is the mental fog people mistake for a blocked third eye. You do not need to unblock it. You need to clean the lens. Marcus Aurelius used a specific word for the rational faculty that governs perception and judgment. He called it the Hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the commanding part of the self that processes every impression and determines what response it deserves. In the meditations, he returned to this concept again and again, not as philosophy in the abstract, but as a daily practical check. Is my Hegemonikon operating from clarity or from disturbance? Is it receiving impressions accurately, or is it processing them through the distortion of fear, desire, or habit? This is not a mystical concept, it is a functional one. The Stoics understood that the quality of your perception determines the quality of every judgment you make, every action you take, every relationship you navigate. A hegemonikon trained to distinguish between what is real and what is constructed is the most powerful cognitive tool a human being can develop. Now place that concept alongside Ajna. The chakra tradition describes the third eye as the center of discernment, the place where you see through illusion to what is real, where inner vision is unclouded by ego projection, by habitual fear, by the noise of what you have been told to see rather than what is actually there. Both traditions are describing the same faculty. One calls it the Hegemonikon, the other calls it Ajna. The practice of developing it is the same in both. Deliberate, disciplined, daily attention to the quality of your own perception. The fog lifts, not when you add something, but when you remove what distorts the lens. Here is what surgical logic actually means in the context of the third eye. It does not mean becoming cold or emotionally disconnected. The Stoics were not emotionless. Marcus Aurelius grieved. Seneca loved. Epictetus cared deeply for his students. Surgical logic means the practiced ability to look at what is in front of you and separate three things that most people experience as one thing: the raw fact, the interpretation, and the emotional weight. Most of the mental clutter that clouds Ajna is not the raw facts of a situation. It is the interpretations layered on top of those facts, carrying emotional weight that the facts themselves never justified. You receive a piece of information, and before your hegemonikon has even finished processing it, the mind has already attached meaning, precedent, prediction, and feeling to something that was, at its core, a neutral event. Surgical logic cuts between those layers with precision, not to remove the emotion, to identify where it is actually coming from so that it can be examined rather than experienced as reality. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." The practice behind that statement is the constant surgical examination of what you value, and whether that assignment comes from the hegemonikon operating clearly or from a distortion you have not yet identified. For the third eye, this practice is the cleanse. Every time you apply it, the lens gets a little cleaner, the pattern recognition gets a little sharper. The distance between impression and judgment grows a little wider. And in that wider space, the clarity that Ajna is actually capable of becomes accessible. This is a daily writing practice. You need a notebook or your phone and 5 minutes. Do it whenever the mental fog is thickest, when you cannot tell what you actually think from what the noise is telling you. Step 1. Name the noise. Write down the thought that will not leave you alone. One sentence. Not the feeling it is generating, the thought itself. The specific thing your hegemonikon keeps being handed to process. Not, "I feel overwhelmed and like everything is collapsing around me," but, "I have not heard back from the person I reached out to about the opportunity." One sentence. That is the impression as it actually arrived. Everything beyond that is what the mind constructed on top of it. Step 2. The surgical cut. Below that sentence, write 3 separate lines. Line 1. The raw fact. What actually happened? State it as plainly as you can. Line 2. The interpretation. What your mind decided it means. Line 3. The weight. What emotion that interpretation has been generating. Now look at all 3 together. Most people find the raw fact is 4 or 5 words. The interpretation is a paragraph. The weight is the heaviest thing they have carried all week. And none of it came from the fact. It came from what the mind built on top of the fact, without permission. Step 3. The hegemonikon question. Go back to the raw fact on line 1. Read it again. Ask one question. What does a mind operating from clarity actually see here? Not, what do you fear? Not, what do you hope? What does the evidence in front of you, stripped of everything the mind added, actually support? That is the question that brings Ajna fully online. Because when you ask it from a clean instrument rather than a cluttered one, the answer arrives without noise. You know what to see. Not because the third eye opened wider, because the lens finally got clean. If this is the kind of synthesis you have been looking for, ancient Stoic discipline, applied directly to the work of clearing and developing your energetic body, subscribe to The Awakened Stoic. This channel does not choose between logic and spirituality. We use both. Every video goes deeper into what it actually looks like to bring these two traditions into practical, daily alignment. Hit subscribe and come back for the next one. Drop this in the comments. My third eye is not a window to the supernatural. It is a lens trained on what is real. The third eye has been wrapped in so much mystical language that most people have lost sight of what it is actually asking of them. It is not asking you to see more, it is asking you to see clearly. And seeing clearly is a discipline, not a gift. It is the daily practice of returning to the Hegemonikon and asking whether the faculty doing your seeing has been trained or left to manage the noise on its own. Marcus Aurelius governed the most complex system the ancient world had ever produced. He made decisions that determined the lives of millions. And he built his capacity for clear perception not through ceremony or ritual, but through the daily relentless practice of examining the quality of his own thinking. Clean the lens. Train the faculty. Trust what you see when it arrives without distortion. The Awakened Stoic. Ancient discipline. Awakened energy.